Don't eat that, sir. The words sliced through the ballroom so suddenly that even the violinist stopped playing mid-note. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a room filled with million-dollar smiles, black tuxedos, and women draped in silk and diamonds, but every eye turned toward the same thing now, a young black waitress standing beside the marble dining table with terror written across her face. Kang Min-jae slowly lowered the silver spoon inches from his mouth. The Korean Mafia boss did not look angry. Somehow, that was worse. Silence spread through the private penthouse ballroom like cold smoke. The city of Chicago glittered 40 floors below them, glowing through walls of glass like another universe entirely. Expensive jazz floated softly from the grand piano near the bar, though now the music sounded distant, almost nervous. The scent of truffle oil, aged whiskey, and polished mahogany lingered in the air. Everything about the engagement banquet had been designed to whisper power. Nothing loud. Nothing desperate. Just quiet wealth and dangerous people pretending to be civilized for one evening. And standing in the middle of that world was Elijah Carter, 19 years old, wearing a black server uniform that suddenly felt too small for her shaking body. A single tray slipped from her trembling hands and crashed against the marble floor, crystal glasses exploding into glittering fragments around her shoes. Nobody looked at the broken glasses. They were looking at Min-jae. The man remained seated at the head of the table beneath the golden chandelier light, one hand resting calmly beside his untouched bowl of soup. His black suit looked perfectly tailored, sharp enough to cut glass. Silver traced the edges of his cufflinks like quiet warning signs. Men twice Elijah's age feared this man without ever hearing him raise his voice. Stories followed Kang Min-jae through every city he touched. Some called him a businessman. Others used darker words. But everyone agreed on one thing. He was not a man people interrupted. Especially not during a private dinner surrounded by investors, politicians, and underworld figures who controlled half the city from behind expensive smiles. Sophia Loren slowly turned in her chair beside him. His fiancée looked breathtaking beneath the ballroom lights, her white satin gown glowing against the black marble floor like fresh snow. Diamonds rested elegantly against her throat. Her expression, however, was ice. "Excuse me?" she asked softly. Somehow her whisper carried more humiliation than a scream. Elijah's throat tightened. Every instinct told her to apologize. To disappear. To become invisible again. That was the rule her mother taught her years ago when she first started helping at luxury hotels. Rich people liked their workers silent. Invisible people survived longer. But Elijah could still smell it. Beneath the rich aroma of black truffle and roasted garlic was something sharp. Bitter. Wrong. Her grandmother used to call it the scent of broken peach pits. Elijah remembered it from old stories whispered in tiny apartment kitchens far away from penthouses like this. Her pulse hammered violently inside her chest. "Sir," she whispered again, barely able to breathe. "Please don't eat it." Around the ballroom, security guards straightened instantly. Several guests exchanged nervous looks. One investor gave a quiet laugh, trying desperately to break the tension. Nobody joined him. Because Kang Min-jae was still staring directly at Elijah now. Calm. Unreadable. Dangerous. Then, very slowly, the Mafia boss slid the spoon back into the bowl. And somewhere behind Sophia Loren's perfect smile, something began to crack. The ballroom remained perfectly still, but it was no longer the comfortable silence of wealthy people enjoying an elegant evening. This silence carried weight. The kind that settled into a room moments before everything changed forever. Elijah could feel it pressing against her chest as dozens of eyes locked onto her from across the candlelit tables. Some looked irritated. Others amused. A few looked nervous now that Kang Min-jae had stopped eating without asking a single question. The soft glow from the chandeliers reflected across the polished black marble floor while rain tapped gently against the towering glass windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Far below, headlights moved through the wet streets like rivers of gold. Up here, inside the private penthouse ballroom of the Hawthorne Grand Hotel, the world felt colder somehow. More fragile. Sophia Loren recovered first. She let out a soft laugh delicate enough to sound harmless, but Elijah heard the sharpness underneath it immediately. "I think the poor girl has confused herself with a detective," Sophia said lightly, lifting her champagne glass with graceful fingers. Several guests chuckled in relief, eager for permission to laugh again. Elijah felt heat rising into her face. She suddenly became aware of every stain on her black server uniform, every hour she had spent carrying heavy trays through kitchens where people barely looked at her long enough to learn her name. She knew exactly what the room saw when they looked at her. Just another black waitress who had spoken out of turn. Marcus Vale, the hotel manager, appeared beside her almost instantly. His forced smile barely concealed panic. "Miss Carter," he whispered harshly through clenched teeth, "apologize to Mr. Kong right now." Elijah swallowed hard. Her mother stood frozen near the service doors, clutching a folded linen towel against her chest. Denise Carter had worked hotels for nearly 20 years, and fear lived inside her the way perfume lived inside these walls. Quiet. Permanent. Her eyes begged Elijah to stop talking before powerful people became angry. But Elijah could not stop thinking about the soup. She watched one of the bodyguards carefully slide the bowl away from Min-jae while another stepped closer to the table, his expression unreadable beneath the ballroom lights. Nobody touched the food now. Nobody even breathed too loudly. Kong Min-jae leaned back slightly in his chair, studying Elijah with calm dark eyes that revealed absolutely nothing. That frightened her more than shouting would have. Men like him did not survive long by trusting strangers. Especially strangers interrupting private dinners. "Why?" he finally asked. His voice was smooth, controlled, almost quiet enough to disappear beneath the rain outside. Yet every person in the ballroom heard him. Clearly. Elijah opened her mouth, but her throat tightened again. She suddenly realized how impossible this sounded. She had no proof. No authority. Just a scent buried beneath expensive ingredients and a feeling she could not explain. Sophia tilted her head with practiced sympathy. "She probably wants attention," she said softly. "Or perhaps money." More uncomfortable laughter drifted around the room. Min-jae never looked away from Elijah. "Answer me," he said calmly. Elijah forced herself to breathe. "The soup smells wrong," she whispered. Marcus Vale looked horrified. One investor actually rolled his eyes. Sophia smiled again, elegant and patient, like a woman humoring a child. "This menu was prepared by a Michelin star chef," she replied. "Black truffle, imported cream, roasted garlic." Perhaps she simply does not recognize fine dining. A few guests smirked at that. Elijah felt humiliation stab through her chest again, but then something strange caught her attention. Sophia's hand. The woman had been perfectly composed all evening, yet now her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her champagne glass. Just for a second. Tiny. Almost invisible. But Elijah noticed. And across the table, Kong Min-jae noticed it too. The rain outside intensified, streaking silver against the towering windows while the ballroom remained trapped inside a silence so tense it almost felt physical. Elijah could hear tiny details now. The soft ticking of a gold watch somewhere near the investors. The faint hum of the climate control system hidden behind the velvet walls. The quiet clink of Sophia Loren setting her champagne glass back onto the white linen tablecloth with careful precision. Nobody was pretending this was a normal dinner anymore. Marcus Vale wiped nervous sweat from his forehead and forced another strained smile toward Kong Min-jae. "Sir, I assure you this is just a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "The kitchen follows the highest safety standards in the city." Min-jae said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on Elijah with unsettling patience, as though he were studying something far more important than a frightened waitress. That stare made her feel transparent. Seen in ways wealthy people usually never bothered to see someone like her. Elijah lowered her eyes briefly, trying to steady the shaking in her hands. Her grandmother used to tell her that fear and truth often arrived together. If your voice trembles while telling the truth, she would say, tell it anyway. Denise Carter slowly stepped forward from near the service doors. Sir, she whispered carefully, her voice carrying years of exhaustion and survival, my daughter did not mean disrespect. Elijah heard the apology hidden beneath every word. Her mother was trying to save both of them before powerful people decided they had become inconvenient. Sophia turned toward Denise with a soft expression polished by years of pretending kindness. Of course, she replied smoothly. We understand accidents happen. But her eyes were cold. Very cold. Then Kong Min-jae reached for the bowl again. The movement was small, almost casual, but the entire ballroom stiffened immediately. Elijah felt her heartbeat slam against her ribs. Sir, she started desperately. One of the bodyguards stepped forward instantly, his dark suit shifting beneath the chandelier light. Enough, he warned quietly. Elijah froze. Min-jae raised one finger without looking away from her. The bodyguard stopped immediately. Absolute obedience. That frightened her even more. Min-jae lifted the spoon slowly, watching Elijah the entire time. Testing her. The polished silver reflected the warm candlelight as steam curled gently upward from the soup. Elijah could smell the bitterness again now beneath the expensive aroma. Faint but unmistakable. Her grandmother had recognized scents the way musicians recognized songs. Bitter almond. Crushed peach pit. Hidden danger dressed in sweetness. Tell me exactly what you smelled, Min-jae said calmly. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Sophia laughed softly again, but this time the sound landed wrong. Forced. Min-jae, she said gently, you cannot seriously be entertaining this. He still did not look at her. Elijah swallowed hard. Something bitter, she whispered. Not food bitter. Different. Marcus Vale gave a nervous chuckle. With all respect. Sir, she grew up in South Side apartment buildings, not fine dining kitchens. A few investors smirked quietly at that. Elijah felt humiliation burn through her chest again, but before she could speak, Min-jae finally turned his head slightly toward the manager. The room changed instantly. No raised voice. No anger. Just a look. Marcus Vale's smile disappeared at once. Interesting, Min-jae said softly. Then he stood. The movement sent tension rippling across the ballroom like electricity through water. Chairs shifted. Conversations died completely. Even the rain outside seemed quieter now. Kong Min-jae picked up the bowl himself and handed it to one of his men. Take this downstairs, he ordered calmly. Have it tested immediately. Sophia's perfect posture faltered for the first time all evening. Tiny. Barely visible. But Elijah saw it clearly now. And so did Min-jae. The ballroom no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a courtroom where nobody knew who was about to be condemned. The jazz musicians near the grand piano sat motionless now, their instruments forgotten beneath the heavy silence settling over the penthouse. Rain rolled steadily down the enormous glass windows overlooking Chicago, turning the city lights outside into blurred rivers of gold and white. Somewhere below, traffic moved through the storm like ordinary life still existed beyond these walls. But inside the Hawthorne Grand Hotel, every heartbeat seemed to wait for the same thing. The test results. Elijah stood near the edge of the ballroom beside shattered crystal still scattered across the marble floor. Nobody had cleaned it yet. Nobody cared about broken glasses anymore. Denise Carter quietly moved beside her daughter and grabbed her trembling hand. Her palms felt cold. You should not have done this, Denise whispered carefully without looking at her. Fear lived inside every syllable. Elijah understood. Women like her mother spent their entire lives surviving rich people's moods. Powerful men could erase jobs, homes, entire futures with one quiet decision. Denise had cleaned hotel rooms, private penthouses, and luxury estates since Elijah was a little girl. She taught her. Daughter early that invisible people survived longer. Do not argue. Do not attract attention. Do not embarrass wealthy people in public. Tonight Elijah had broken every rule. Across the ballroom, Sophia Loren remained seated beside the empty chair where Kang Min-jae had been moments earlier. The elegant smile she wore still looked perfect from a distance, but Elijah noticed small cracks appearing underneath it now. Her fingers tapped lightly against the stem of her champagne glass. Once. Twice. Then stopped completely when she realized someone might notice. She looked toward the private elevator at the far end of the ballroom where Min-jae had disappeared with two of his men. Several investors murmured quietly among themselves now, their confidence fading beneath the tension hanging in the air. One older man loosened his tie and whispered something about media exposure. Another checked his phone repeatedly as though desperate for escape. Nobody left. Nobody wanted to insult Kang Min-jae by walking out during whatever this had become. Marcus Vale approached Elijah again, his expensive suit now damp beneath the collar from nervous sweat. Do you understand what you have done tonight? He hissed under his breath. If that test comes back clean, you will never work in this city again. Elijah lowered her eyes. Shame and fear twisted together inside her stomach, but beneath them was something stronger now. Certainty. She knew what she smelled. Then the private elevator doors opened. Instantly the room went silent again. Kang Min-jae stepped back into the ballroom with calm measured movements, his black suit untouched by the chaos surrounding him. Beside him walked Daniel Seo, his closest advisor, carrying a sealed evidence container where the soup bowl now rested beneath clear plastic. Daniel rarely spoke during public events. Tonight his face looked carved from stone. Min-jae returned to his seat slowly while every guest watched him like nervous students waiting for judgment. Sophia rose gracefully to meet him halfway, her white satin dress gliding softly across the marble floor. This has gone far enough, she said gently, placing one elegant hand against his arm. You are allowing a frightened waitress to ruin our evening. For the first time all night, Min-jae looked directly at her. His expression remained perfectly calm. That calmness frightened Elijah more than anger ever could. Daniel Seo stepped forward quietly. The preliminary test found traces of cyanide, he announced. The words landed softly. But the effect was immediate. Several guests gasped aloud. A champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the marble floor. Across the ballroom, Sophia Loren slowly removed her hand from Kang Min-jae's arm. The ballroom erupted into whispers so fast it sounded like a storm moving through dry leaves. Investors leaned toward one another in disbelief. Jewelry shimmered beneath trembling candlelight as nervous hands reached for phones, champagne glasses, and folded napkins. Nobody seemed certain whether they were witnessing a scandal, a crime, or the beginning of something much worse. Outside the towering windows, lightning flickered silently behind the clouds over Chicago, illuminating the skyline in pale silver flashes. Inside the Hawthorne Grand Hotel, the atmosphere had changed completely. The room no longer belonged to wealthy guests celebrating an engagement. It belonged to Kang Min-jae now. Completely. The Korean Mafia boss remained seated at the head of the marble table, calm and unreadable while fear spread quietly around him like spilled ink. Elijah noticed something strange then. The more silent Min-jae became, the more frightened everyone else looked. Daniel Seo placed the sealed evidence container carefully onto the dining table. The kitchen staff is being questioned downstairs, he announced evenly. Nobody enters or leaves the hotel. A nervous investor immediately stood up. Now wait a minute, he protested. You cannot lock down a private event full of business executives. Nobody answered him. Two security men quietly moved closer to the ballroom doors instead. The investor slowly sat back down. Sophia Loren still looked stunning beneath the chandelier light, but elegance alone could not hide the tension tightening across her face now. This is absurd, she said softly. Turning toward Min-jae again. Someone is clearly trying to frame me. Her voice remained smooth and graceful, yet Elijah noticed her breathing had changed. Slightly faster now. more controlled. Like someone struggling to remain composed while standing too close to a cliff edge. Min-jae folded his hands calmly in front of him. Perhaps, he replied. Then we will discover who. His tone remained gentle. Almost polite. Somehow that made the room even colder. Marcus Vale suddenly stepped forward again, desperate to redirect attention away from the hotel. Sir, if I may, he said carefully, this girl had access to the dining floor all evening. She could have easily caused confusion herself. Elijah felt her stomach drop. Several guests immediately turned toward her again. Sophia said nothing this time. But Elijah noticed the faintest flicker of satisfaction move behind her eyes. Denise Carter instinctively stepped closer to her daughter. My child would never hurt anyone, she whispered. Her voice trembled badly now. Min-jae looked toward Elijah again, studying her in silence while thunder rolled faintly outside beyond the glass walls of the penthouse. Why were you watching the soup? He finally asked. Elijah hesitated. Every person in the ballroom waited for her answer. She suddenly became aware of how impossible this all sounded. A 19-year-old waitress standing in a room full of billionaires and criminal power brokers, trying to explain instinct and scent like they were evidence. Because Miss Laurent switched the bowls, Elijah admitted quietly. The room froze again. Sophia blinked once. Slowly. Excuse me, she asked. Elijah forced herself to continue despite the fear clawing through her chest. I saw it happen before the first course was served, she whispered. The kitchen prepared 2 bowls separately. Yours and his. Then before dinner started, you traded them. Several guests exchanged alarmed looks. Daniel Seo narrowed his eyes immediately. Why would she do that? One investor whispered. Elijah swallowed hard. I do not know, she answered honestly. Sophia suddenly laughed again, though the sound carried sharp edges now. This is unbelievable, she said. You are trusting the imagination of a frightened waitress over me? Min-jae remained still for several long seconds. Then he looked toward Daniel Seo. Pull the security footage from the dining floor and kitchen corridor, he ordered calmly. For the first time all night, genuine fear crossed Sophia Lawrence's face. The storm outside deepened as midnight crept over Chicago, rain sliding endlessly down the towering glass walls of the penthouse ballroom like tears across cold steel. Inside, nobody touched the expensive food anymore. Plates sat abandoned beneath golden candlelight while tension spread through the room so heavily it seemed to slow the air itself. The engagement celebration had transformed into something darker now. Every whispered conversation stopped the moment Kang Min-jae shifted in his chair. Every nervous glance drifted toward Sophia Loren before quickly looking away again. Fear had entered the room quietly, dressed in diamonds and silk. Elijah stood beside her mother near the service corridor, trying to steady her breathing while hotel staff avoided looking directly at her. 20 minutes ago she had been invisible. Now she felt exposed beneath every chandelier in the ballroom. Denise Carter held her daughter's hand tightly enough to hurt. When this is over, we leave quietly, she whispered. No matter what happens. Elijah nodded, though something told her none of the people in this room would be leaving quietly tonight. The private elevator doors opened again with a soft metallic sound. Daniel Seo returned carrying a tablet computer in one hand while 2 security men followed closely behind him. The entire ballroom straightened immediately. Kang Min-jae lifted his eyes slowly toward his advisor. The kitchen cameras? He asked calmly. Daniel nodded once. Most of them, he answered carefully. Sophia's expression tightened almost invisibly. Most? Min-jae repeated. Daniel placed the tablet onto the marble dining table. 3 cameras near the private preparation corridor lost signal for exactly 4 minutes before dinner service. A murmur spread instantly through the guests. Marcus Vale looked horrified. That is impossible, the hotel manager said quickly. Our security systems are state-of-the-art. Daniel looked at him without emotion. And yet they failed. Nobody missed the meaning behind those words. Failure inside Kong Min-jae's world rarely happened by accident. Sophia folded her arms slowly across her white satin dress. "This proves nothing," she said smoothly. "Technical issues happen in every hotel." Daniel tapped the screen once. Grainy black and white footage appeared from another hallway camera nearby. Elijah leaned forward slightly. The timestamp showed less than 20 minutes before dinner began. Staff members moved quickly through the corridor carrying trays and silver serving carts beneath soft overhead lighting. Then Sophia appeared on screen. The ballroom went silent again. She moved elegantly through the hallway alone, her heels clicking sharply against polished floors. She paused outside the private preparation room where Min-jae's dinner had been assembled separately from the guests' meals. Then the video froze. Daniel zoomed closer. Sophia looked directly toward the camera seconds before the signal suddenly cut to black. Several investors shifted nervously in their seats now. One woman quietly covered her mouth. Marcus Vale looked pale enough to collapse. Sophia let out a soft incredulous laugh. "You cannot seriously think this means I poisoned anyone," she said. "I was checking on the engagement menu." Kong Min-jae remained completely still while thunder rolled faintly outside. Elijah watched him carefully now. The man did not react emotionally the way ordinary people did. He watched. Calculated. Waited. That frightened her deeply because she sensed he already knew more than he was saying aloud. Then Daniel spoke again. "There is one more thing." He turned the tablet toward Min-jae. A banking record filled the screen. Wire transfers. Large ones. Offshore accounts connected to shell corporations overseas. Sophia's elegant composure flickered for half a second before returning. Daniel's voice stayed calm. 3 payments totaling $12 million were transferred this month from an account linked to Miss Laurent into companies associated with the Honcho syndicate. The room seemed to stop breathing. Even the rain outside felt distant now. Elijah noticed something terrifying then. Kong Min-jae did not look shocked. He looked disappointed. The silence after Daniel's CO revealed the wire transfers felt heavier than thunder. Nobody in the ballroom moved. Nobody dared to. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly above frozen faces while rain continued sliding down the towering glass walls of the penthouse like the city itself was trying not to look inside. The engagement dinner had completely collapsed now, leaving behind only fear dressed in tuxedos and diamonds. Sophia Loren stood motionless near the center of the ballroom, her white satin gown catching the golden candlelight like polished ivory. For the first time all evening, she no longer looked untouchable. She looked cornered. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly, though her voice had lost some of its smooth confidence now. "Offshore transfers do not prove attempted murder." Kong Min-jae remained seated at the head of the marble table, his dark eyes fixed calmly on her face. Elijah could not understand how someone could appear so calm while learning the woman beside him might have betrayed him. But perhaps powerful men survived by never showing pain in front of witnesses. Daniel CO spoke carefully. "The Honcho syndicate has been trying to move into Chicago territory for almost 2 years." Several investors immediately lowered their eyes. Nobody wanted to appear involved in that conversation. "Those transfers began 3 weeks after your engagement announcement," Daniel continued. Sophia folded her arms tighter. "Business partnerships are not crimes." "No," Daniel replied evenly. "But poisoning someone usually is." The words landed softly across the ballroom, but Elijah felt them hit like ice water. Denise Carter squeezed her daughter's hand harder beside her. Elijah could feel her mother silently praying for this nightmare to end before anyone else got dragged into it. Then Sophia suddenly laughed again. Not warmly this time. Not elegantly. Bitterly. "You are all trusting a waitress over me," she snapped. Her voice echoed sharply beneath the chandeliers, startling several guests. A frightened girl from the service corridor points a finger and suddenly I become the villain? Elijah flinched at the venom in her tone. Moments ago Sophia had spoken with polished grace. Now something colder had slipped through the cracks. Kang Min-jae finally stood from his chair again. Instantly the room went still. Even Sophia stopped talking. He moved slowly across the ballroom floor, the polished marble reflecting faint gold beneath his shoes. Elijah noticed how nobody stepped into his path. Not security. Not investors. Not hotel staff. The man carried authority the way storms carried lightning. Naturally. Quietly. Dangerously. He stopped only a few feet from Sophia. "I gave you everything," he said softly. The calm sadness in his voice somehow felt more frightening than anger. Sophia stared at him, her breathing uneven now. "You gave me a cage," she whispered back. Several guests exchanged nervous looks. Nobody expected honesty anymore tonight. Min-jae tilted his head slightly. "A cage lined with diamonds?" Sophia's eyes hardened. "You do not understand what it is like standing beside someone everyone fears," she replied. "You walk into rooms and silence follows you. People obey you before you speak. They look at me and only see your shadow." Elijah watched Min-jae carefully then. For the first time all evening, something flickered behind his calm expression. Not rage. Hurt. Real hurt. Sophia took another slow breath. "The Honcho Syndicate offered me freedom," she admitted quietly. Gasps spread across the ballroom again. Marcus Vale looked ready to faint beside the dining table. Daniel Seo remained perfectly still. Sophia's eyes glistened beneath the chandelier light now, though her voice stayed steady. "I never thought tonight would actually happen," she whispered. "I thought they only wanted leverage over you." Min-jae said nothing. Outside, lightning flashed across the storm-dark skyline. Elijah suddenly realized something terrifying then. Sophia Loren might not have known poison had entered the bowl at all. And judging by the expression slowly forming across Kang Min-jae's face, he had just realized it too. The ballroom seemed to tilt beneath the weight of Sophia Loren's confession. Nobody spoke. Nobody even reached for their drinks anymore. The only sound was rain striking the glass walls high above Chicago and the distant low hum of thunder rolling somewhere beyond the skyline. Golden chandelier light shimmered across untouched plates and crystal glasses while fear quietly settled over every table like dust after an explosion. Elijah stood perfectly still beside her mother, trying to understand how an elegant engagement dinner had transformed into something that felt more like the unraveling of an empire. Kang Min-jae remained facing Sophia in complete silence. The distance between them was only a few feet now, yet it felt enormous. The kind of distance built slowly over years of secrets. Sophia's eyes glistened beneath the candlelight, but Elijah could not tell whether the woman felt regret, fear, or simply exhaustion from pretending too long. "You should have told me," Min-jae said quietly at last. Sophia let out a weak laugh that sounded painfully human compared to the polished perfection she had worn all evening. "And said what?" she asked. "That your enemies approached me because everyone in this city knows I was the only person close enough to reach you?" Several guests lowered their eyes immediately. Nobody wanted to acknowledge how true that sounded. Min-jae's world was built on loyalty and fear. Trust inside that world was rare and expensive. Sophia looked down briefly at the diamond engagement ring on her hand. "At first they only asked questions," she admitted softly. "Your schedule. Your meetings. Your travel plans." Daniel Seo listened carefully from near the marble table, his expression carved from stone. "Then the money started coming," Sophia continued. $12 million to smile beside you and keep listening." Elijah noticed her voice trembling now. Not dramatically. Quietly. Like someone finally too tired to keep carrying something heavy alone. "You could have refused," Daniel said evenly. Sophia turned toward him sharply. "Could I?" she asked bitterly. "People like you act as if refusal exists." The room went still again. Elijah sensed something important hidden inside those words. Something deeper than greed. Min-jae slowly glanced toward the rain-covered windows overlooking the city. Who handled the arrangement? He asked calmly. Sophia hesitated. For the first time all evening, genuine fear fully appeared across her face. If I tell you, she whispered, they will come after me. Min-jae looked back at her. They already did. The sentence landed softly but carried terrifying truth inside it. Sophia's composure finally cracked then. Her shoulders sagged slightly beneath the satin fabric of her gown. I did not know about the poison, she admitted quietly. I swear to you. Elijah believed her instantly. The fear in Sophia's eyes no longer looked calculated. It looked real. Daniel Seo stepped closer. Then why switch the bowls? Sophia closed her eyes briefly. Because they told me to move his original place setting before dinner began, she answered. They said it was part of a loyalty test. A ripple of disbelief spread through the ballroom. Marcus Vale looked completely lost now, standing pale and speechless beside the dining table. Elijah suddenly remembered something else from earlier that night. A man near the kitchen corridor. Expensive gray suit. Silver cufflinks shaped like dragons. She had seen him speaking privately with one of the catering supervisors moments before the cameras failed. Her heartbeat quickened. There was another man, Elijah said suddenly. Every head turned toward her again. She swallowed hard beneath the attention. Near the preparation hallway before dinner, she continued carefully. He was carrying a black umbrella even inside the hotel. Daniel Seo's eyes narrowed instantly. Did you recognize him? Elijah shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. But when Miss Lauren entered the corridor, he stopped talking and looked directly at me. Outside the penthouse windows, lightning flashed again across the storm-dark city. And for the first time all night, Elijah realized the danger inside this ballroom might not be over yet. Lightning flashed across the skyline again, turning the rain-covered windows into mirrors of silver and black for one brief haunting second. Inside the penthouse ballroom, every guest seemed to shrink deeper into silence as Elijah's words settled over the room. A man with a black umbrella. Silver dragon cufflinks. Waiting near the preparation corridor moments before the cameras failed. Daniel Seo's expression hardened instantly. Describe him carefully, he said. Elijah tried to steady her breathing while dozens of eyes fixed on her again. She hated attention. Hated how visible she had become tonight. But something inside her knew this mattered now more than ever. Tall, she whispered. Maybe early 40s. Gray suit. Dark hair slicked back. Daniel exchanged a quick glance with one of Min-jae's security men. The reaction was subtle, but Elijah noticed it immediately. So did Kang Min-jae. You recognize the description, Min-jae said calmly. Daniel hesitated only briefly. Possibly, he answered. Han Jae-sung. Several people near the investors' table visibly stiffened at the name. One older businessman quietly muttered something under his breath in Korean before quickly lowering his eyes again. Elijah could feel the atmosphere changing once more. Fear inside the ballroom no longer centered only around poisoned food or betrayal. Now it carried the heavier weight of old enemies. Sophia slowly sank into one of the velvet dining chairs, her composure fading further with every passing minute. I never met him directly, she whispered suddenly. Only intermediaries. Daniel looked toward her sharply. But you know the name. Sophia closed her eyes briefly. Everybody in your world knows the name. Kang Min-jae stood near the rain-covered windows now, staring out across Chicago's glittering skyline. His reflection shimmered faintly against the glass beside streaks of rainwater. Elijah suddenly realized how lonely powerful people must become. Men feared him. Businessmen obeyed him. Entire rooms fell silent when he entered them. Yet somehow he still ended up standing alone beside a poisoned dinner while strangers argued over who betrayed him. Hancho has wanted Chicago for years, Daniel explained quietly to the room. Jae-sung handles expansion personally. Marcus Vale looked completely overwhelmed. This is insanity, the hotel manager whispered. My hotel hosted organized crime negotiations? Nobody answered him. Because everybody already knew the truth. Elijah noticed Sophia watching Min-jae carefully now. There was no manipulation left in her expression anymore. Only regret. I thought they only wanted information, she admitted softly. They promised nobody would get hurt. Min-jae finally turned away from the window. People who promise safety while hiding in shadows usually mean the opposite. His voice stayed calm, but Elijah sensed exhaustion buried deep beneath it now. Years of it. One of the security men suddenly approached Daniel quickly and whispered something into his ear. Daniel's eyes darkened immediately. Sir, he said quietly to Min-jae, the catering supervisor assigned to the private kitchen is gone. The room froze again. Gone? Marcus Vale repeated weakly. Daniel nodded once. His phone was left behind in the locker room downstairs. Security footage shows him leaving through the underground parking entrance 15 minutes ago. Elijah felt cold move through her chest. Whoever poisoned the soup had already vanished into the storm outside. Sophia slowly covered her face with trembling hands. Oh God, she whispered. Min-jae remained motionless for several long seconds. Then he looked directly toward Elijah again. Not through her. At her. You saved my life tonight, he said quietly. The words stunned the ballroom into complete silence. Elijah felt heat rush into her face instantly. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that before. Not with respect. Not in a room like this. Denise Carter looked close to tears beside her daughter. Then the private elevator chimed softly again. Every head turned toward the doors. And when they opened, the man stepping out carried a black umbrella dripping rainwater onto the marble floor. The private elevator doors slid open with a soft metallic whisper that somehow sounded louder than thunder. Every conversation inside the ballroom died instantly. Rainwater dripped steadily onto the black marble floor as the man stepped out beneath the golden chandelier light carrying a folded black umbrella in one hand. Tall. Gray suit. Slicked back dark hair. Silver dragon cufflinks gleaming faintly beneath the sleeve of his coat. Elijah's breath caught in her throat immediately. That is him, she whispered. Daniel Seo moved in front of Kong Min-jae at once, his posture sharpening like drawn steel. Several security men shifted positions around the ballroom with frightening coordination, silently sealing exits without causing panic among the guests. Yet the man entering the penthouse looked completely calm. Almost amused. He closed the umbrella carefully and glanced around the ballroom as if arriving late to an ordinary business meeting instead of walking into a room full of people staring at him with fear. Mr. Kong, he said smoothly, offering a small respectful bow. I apologize for interrupting your evening. Elijah felt cold spread through her chest. The man's voice carried confidence too polished to belong to someone afraid. Kong Min-jae remained still near the rain-covered windows. Han Jae-sung, he said quietly. The name settled heavily across the ballroom. Several investors looked away instantly while others sat frozen behind untouched wine glasses and candlelit plates. Nobody wanted to witness whatever happened next. Han Jae-sung smiled faintly. I was hoping we could speak privately. You poisoned my dinner, Min-jae replied calmly. Jae-sung gave a soft, disappointed sigh, almost like a businessman frustrated by misunderstanding. No, he answered. I exposed weakness around you. Sophia Loren slowly rose from her chair, her face pale beneath the chandelier light. You told me nobody would be harmed, she whispered. Jae-sung finally looked toward her. Whatever warmth had existed in his earlier promises was gone now. And yet here you are, he replied coolly. Still unharmed. Elijah felt Denise Carter grip her arm tighter beside her. The ballroom suddenly seemed smaller, tighter, filled with invisible pressure pressing against every wall of glass and marble. Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline again, illuminating rain streaks running down the windows behind Kong Min-jae like silver veins. You used her, Min-jae said quietly. Jae-sung shrugged slightly. People like Sophia are always used eventually. Beautiful. Isolated. desperate to escape powerful men. Sophia looked shattered by the words. Elijah realized then that this man understood people the way predators understood weakness. Not emotionally. Strategically. Daniel Co stepped forward carefully. You walked into a locked ballroom full of armed security, he warned. Either you are very brave or very stupid. Jae-sung smiled again. Neither. Practical. Then he slowly removed a phone from inside his jacket pocket and placed it gently onto the marble dining table. The police are already downstairs, he continued calmly. Anonymous tips. Financial records. Offshore accounts. Journalists will arrive within minutes. A wave of panic swept through several investors immediately. One man stood up so quickly his chair nearly toppled backward. Jae-sung barely noticed. His eyes stayed fixed on Kang Min-jae. Tonight was never about poison, he said softly. It was about collapse. Elijah watched Min-jae carefully then. Most men would have exploded with rage by now. Instead he looked strangely calm. Tired almost. Like someone finally seeing the shape of a trap too large to fight with violence or threats. Jae-sung glanced briefly toward Elijah next. Though I did not expect the waitress, he admitted. The way he said waitress made Elijah feel invisible and exposed at the same time. Funny, he added quietly. The entire evening unraveled because one invisible girl decided to speak. Kang Min-jae slowly looked toward Elijah too. And for the second time that night, the most feared man in the ballroom nodded at her with unmistakable respect. Rain hammered harder against the towering glass walls of the penthouse as the ballroom sank deeper into chaos disguised as silence. Nobody knew where to look anymore. Some guests stared nervously at Han Jae-sung standing calmly beside the marble dining table. Others watched Kang Min-jae, waiting for some explosion of fury that never came. But Elijah noticed something more unsettling than anger tonight. Acceptance. As if Min-jae already understood this evening had changed everything long before the poisoned soup ever reached the table. The soft glow of chandeliers reflected across abandoned champagne glasses and untouched plates while city lights shimmered far below through sheets of rain. Somewhere downstairs, faint sirens began echoing through the storm-dark streets of Chicago. Jae-sung glanced toward the windows with quiet satisfaction. Right on time, he said smoothly. Several investors immediately panicked. Phones appeared in trembling hands. One older executive muttered about federal investigations while another hurried toward the ballroom exit only to stop when security blocked the doors. Nobody was leaving yet. Sophia Loren slowly removed the engagement ring from her finger and stared at it beneath the candlelight. Her hands trembled visibly now. You said none of this would become public, she whispered toward Jae-sung. He barely looked at her. Public pressure destroys empires faster than bullets ever could, he replied calmly. Elijah watched Sophia carefully then. The woman no longer looked elegant or manipulative. Just exhausted. Like someone waking up too late inside a nightmare they helped create. Daniel Co stepped closer to Min-jae. We can still contain this, he said quietly. Min-jae shook his head once. No, he answered softly. Not tonight. The simplicity of the words silenced even Daniel. Elijah suddenly realized something important. Powerful men spent their entire lives controlling rooms, negotiations, businesses, enemies. But sometimes truth arrived from places too small to control. A scent in a bowl of soup. A frightened waitress speaking at the wrong moment. A secret exposed beneath chandelier light. Han Jae-sung straightened the cuff of his gray suit calmly. Your empire survives because people fear you, he said to Min-jae. But fear collapses the moment weakness becomes visible. Min-jae looked at him without emotion. And what weakness did you expose tonight? Jae-sung smiled faintly. That even the great Kang Min-jae could not recognize betrayal sitting beside him. The sentence landed heavily across the ballroom. Sophia closed her eyes in pain. Elijah expected Min-jae to lash out somehow. Instead he surprised everyone. He turned toward Sophia first. Did you ever love me? He asked quietly. The room became perfectly still again. Even Jae-sung seemed caught off guard by the question. Sophia looked down at the ring resting in her palm, diamonds glittering softly like broken ice. At first, she whispered. Yes. Min-jae absorbed the answer silently. Then he nodded once, almost sadly. That makes this harder, he admitted. Elijah felt something tighten painfully inside her chest hearing that. Because beneath the money, fear, syndicates, and power, this suddenly sounded heartbreakingly human. Downstairs, the sound of police sirens grew louder now. Blue and red lights flickered faintly against the rain outside. Several guests looked completely terrified. Han Jae-sung reached for his umbrella again. This city changes tonight, he announced calmly. Your alliances collapse. Your investors disappear. Your enemies grow bold. Min-jae stepped slowly toward him then, his polished shoes crossing the marble floor with quiet certainty. Maybe, he replied. But tonight also proved something else. Jae-sung tilted his head slightly. What is that? Kang Min-jae looked directly toward Elijah standing near the service corridor beside her frightened mother. The people your world ignores, he said softly, are often the only ones capable of seeing the truth. For the first time since entering the ballroom, Han Jae-sung's confident smile faded. Blue and red police lights flickered across the rain-covered windows of the penthouse ballroom, staining the marble floors with restless color while the storm outside continued swallowing Chicago in darkness. The elegant engagement banquet had dissolved completely now. Investors sat frozen behind untouched crystal glasses, whispering nervously into phones that no longer seemed capable of saving anyone. Expensive perfume mixed with the fading scent of truffle soup and candle smoke while fear drifted quietly beneath the chandeliers like invisible fog. Han Jae-sung stood near the private elevator holding his black umbrella loosely at his side, though for the first time since entering the ballroom, he no longer looked fully in control. Kang Min-jae's final words still hung heavily in the air. The people your world ignores are often the only ones capable of seeing the truth. Elijah lowered her eyes immediately after Min-jae looked toward her again. She still could not understand why the most feared man in the room kept speaking about her with respect instead of dismissal. Her entire life, people with money had looked through her like glass. Hotel guests snapped fingers at her mother without learning her name. Managers corrected her posture more often than they praised her work. Yet tonight, inside this palace of wealth and power, one invisible waitress had changed the direction of everything. Sophia Loren slowly rose from her chair again, her white satin gown wrinkled now beneath the pressure of hours spent unraveling in front of strangers. The diamonds around her throat no longer looked glamorous. They looked heavy. What happens now? She asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Rain tapped softly against the towering windows while distant sirens echoed somewhere below. Daniel Seo checked his phone once before slipping it back into his jacket. The authorities are downstairs speaking with hotel security, he said calmly. The media is gathering outside already. Marcus Vale nearly collapsed into one of the velvet dining chairs at the news. My hotel is finished, he whispered weakly. Nobody comforted him. Kang Min-jae remained standing near the center of the ballroom, calm despite the destruction unfolding around him. Elijah noticed something strange then. He no longer looked like a mafia boss protecting power. He looked like a tired man finally seeing the cost of the world he built. Han Jae-sung gave a faint disappointed smile. This could have ended differently, he said toward Min-jae. You still think power is built on loyalty? Min-jae shook his head slowly. No, he answered softly. Power built on fear always collapses eventually. Even Daniel Seo looked surprised hearing him say that aloud. Sophia stared at Min-jae in silence for several long seconds before quietly removing the diamond necklace from around her neck. She placed it carefully onto the marble table beside the untouched champagne glasses. I never wanted this life, she whispered. Then why stay? Min-jae asked gently. Sophia looked toward the rain-dark windows. Because people like me mistake luxury for safety. The sentence settled painfully into the room. Elijah understood it immediately. So did her mother. Denise Carter had spent years cleaning luxury spaces owned by lonely wealthy people pretending money could protect them from heartbreak, betrayal, or fear. But tonight proved otherwise. One frightened girl from the service corridor had seen danger long before the billionaires at the table. Security near the ballroom entrance suddenly stepped aside as uniformed detectives entered the penthouse quietly. Nobody resisted. Nobody argued anymore. Han Jae-sung adjusted the cuff of his gray suit one final time before offering Min Jae a small respectful nod. "This city will remember tonight," he said. "Yes," Min Jae replied calmly. "But not for the reasons you hoped." Elijah watched the detectives escort people from the ballroom one by one while rain continued falling endlessly beyond the glass walls. The chandeliers still glowed softly overhead. The jazz instruments still rested untouched near the piano. But the illusion of perfection had disappeared forever. And standing quietly beside her mother in a wrinkled black waitress uniform, Elijah Carter suddenly realized something extraordinary. For the first time in her life, powerful people had finally listened when she spoke. 3 months later, winter settled quietly over Chicago. Snow drifted softly across downtown streets while golden holiday lights reflected against frozen sidewalks and passing taxis below the evening sky. The storm that destroyed the engagement banquet at the Hawthorne Grand Hotel had long disappeared from the headlines, but whispers about that night still moved through the city's wealthy circles like ghost stories spoken behind closed doors. Investors vanished. Alliances collapsed. Several federal investigations quietly expanded into businesses once considered untouchable. The Hawthorne Grand changed ownership before spring arrived. People blamed corruption, hidden money, and betrayal. But the few who truly understood what happened always remembered something else first. A frightened waitress standing beneath crystal chandeliers telling powerful people the truth when nobody else dared to speak. Elijah Carter sat near the window of a small coffee shop on the north side of the city, watching snowflakes drift past the glass while warm jazz played softly overhead. Her college textbooks rested open beside a half-finished cup of hot chocolate. Sometimes the entire night still felt unreal to her. One evening carrying silver trays through a luxury ballroom had somehow changed the direction of her entire life. Across the table, Denise Carter smiled quietly while folding her winter gloves into her purse. The exhaustion that had lived inside her mother for years seemed lighter now somehow. Softer. "You still study too much," Denise teased gently. Elijah laughed under her breath. "That scholarship expects good grades." Denise shook her head slowly, still amazed every time she heard the word scholarship spoken about her daughter. 2 weeks after the ballroom incident, Elijah had received a private acceptance letter from Northwestern University along with full financial support funded anonymously through a charitable foundation. Anonymous, though both women already knew exactly where the money came from. Elijah had tried writing a thank you letter once. No response ever came. That felt strangely fitting. Kong Min-jae remained a man who moved through silence more comfortably than attention. A black SUV slowly stopped outside the coffee shop then, its headlights glowing against falling snow. Elijah noticed it immediately. So did her mother. The driver never stepped out. Neither did the passenger sitting quietly in the back seat behind tinted windows. Yet Elijah somehow knew who it was. The car remained there only a few seconds before pulling away smoothly into evening traffic again. No words. No dramatic farewell. Just quiet acknowledgement from a man whose life had changed because someone invisible finally chose to speak. Elijah watched the taillights disappear beyond the snowy intersection and felt something unexpected settle inside her chest. Peace. Not because wealthy people suddenly became good. Not because dangerous men disappeared from the world. But because she finally understood something her grandmother tried teaching her years ago in their tiny apartment kitchen. Human worth does not change depending on who notices it. The world often overlooks quiet people. Waitresses. Janitors. Mothers working double shifts. Girls standing silently beside ballroom walls while rich guests laugh too loudly. But sometimes those invisible people carry the clearest vision of all. Sometimes they are the only ones brave enough to interrupt disaster before it arrives. Snow continued falling softly outside while Elijah returned to her textbooks beneath the warm coffee shop lights. And somewhere beyond the city skyline, powerful men still remembered the night a young black waitress saved a life simply because she trusted her conscience when nobody else would listen. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that dignity, courage, and truth can come from the most unexpected voices.